I've flown around the world in this, and this. And these are some of the world's best first-class airlines, and they're some of the bougiest ways to travel around the world. And in this video, I'll share with you how you can unlock these first-class experiences for yourself without going broke. Now, if you're traveling to and from Europe, then you've probably heard of Lufthansa. It's one of the world's most iconic airlines, and they've got a fantastic first-class product to go along with it. With a spacious seat at the front of this Boeing 747 nicknamed the Queen of the Skies, as well as a private first-class terminal in Frankfurt, which, by the way, comes with its own security and customs checkpoint, restaurant-quality food, and a private car transfer directly to the airplane, this is a first-class experience you don't want to miss out on. You can find Lufthansa's first-class routes from their hubs in Frankfurt and Munich to basically every gateway airport in the United States, although there's no airports in Canada right now that get first class. Well, what about the cost? Well, normally Lufthansa First Class would run you a sweet $10,000 or so. But instead of paying cash, you can use points to book this experience for a fraction of the price. In fact, if you use Aeroplan points, which you can easily earn in Canada and the US, then a Lufthansa First Class flight would start at 90,000 Aeroplan points one way for the shortest flights to Boston and New York, and it would rise to 100,000 Aeroplan points for the longer flights to North America. And if you want to book Lufthansa First Class on points, then you'll want to do so within 14 days of travel, because that's when Lufthansa actually makes seats available to book on points. If you typically plan your trips farther in advance, like most people do, then you can always book a business class flight on Aeroplan and then change it over to Lufthansa First Class within 14 days if you find the right seat and the right route that works for you. Now, to be honest, Lufthansa First Class is great, but the seat is actually a little bit older and a bit outdated, even though the ground experience in Frankfurt in the first class terminal is amazing. And now we're going to go to the other end of the spectrum, where we've got an ultra-modern first class seat with a 42-inch 4K entertainment screen, but the ground experience is a little bit more modest. And I'm talking about an airline that really turned heads a few years ago when it first introduced this first class cabin, one that flies to many US gateway airports as well from its home base in Japan. That's of course All Nippon Airways, or ANA, and their new first class product on the Boeing 777. I was lucky enough to try out this first class flight a few months ago, and I can truly say it was a spectacular experience, one of my favorite flights of all time. Now, booking this flight for yourself might be a little tough because there's only a few limited routes where this new first class product is available. These include ANA's Boeing 777 flights from Tokyo to New York and Los Angeles, as well as occasionally to San Francisco, Chicago, London Heathrow, and Frankfurt. Now again, if you pay for ANA New First Class, it's going to be $15,000 or more, so a better way to experience this for yourself would be to go ahead and redeem points for the experience. You can either use Aeroplan points, which starts at 110,000 points for the one-way journey, or a much better way to book this flight on points is to redeem Virgin Atlantic Flying Club miles, which has a partnership with ANA, and it starts at only 60,000 Flying Club miles for that one-way flight. That's right, Aeroplan requires 110,000 points, but Virgin Atlantic only charges 60,000 points for the exact same flight. If you don't have Virgin Atlantic miles, you can transfer them one-to-one from the major US points currencies by American Express, Chase, and Citi Thank You points. And if you live in Canada and don't have access to US credit cards, well, we've got an entire video about getting access to US credit cards, which you can check out in the description below. And before you know it, you have access to a much wider range of credit cards south of the border to help elevate your travel even more. Speaking of which, let me tell you about the #1 event for elevating your travel, and that's of course the Travel Summit, taking place in Toronto later this year on October 29th and 30th. The Travel Summit is a 2-day conference where we've invited the best and brightest minds in the world of travel to share with you the best tips and strategies for traveling the world in the way that's fulfilling to you by maximizing the power of rewards points and loyalty programs. We're going to have 24 breakout sessions across 2 days to learn all the ins and outs of the industry, including some of the best tips for actually booking aspirational first class flights, just like the ones we're talking about in this video. So if you're interested in leveling up your travel game and connecting with fellow like-minded travelers, then don't miss out on the Travel Summit. Visit thetravelsummit.com to learn more and get your tickets, and I'll see you on October 29th in Toronto. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever sat in economy class and felt like you just didn't have a lot of space to yourself? Have you ever wondered if it's possible to get a whole room and a whole bed to yourself on board an airplane? Neither had I until I experienced this absolutely incredible first-class suite on the Singapore Airlines Airbus A380, otherwise known as Singapore Airlines Suites Class or just Singapore Suites for short. This is a full hotel room in the sky. It's got its own television, a door, an electronic swiveling chair, and a separate bed all on its own. And the best part, if you're traveling with your companion, you can even convert that bed into a double bed in the sky by lowering the divider between yourself and the adjacent suite. Just make sure you're not up to any funny business. Now, the Singapore Suites experience is pretty exclusive, and as such, you can only book it through Singapore Airlines' very own KrisFlyer loyalty program. KrisFlyer is a transfer partner of HSBC Rewards here in Canada, but that's the slow way to earn points. If you want to rack up the points quickly, you'll want to get US credit cards and transfer your Amex US points, your Chase Ultimate Rewards, or your Capital One miles over to KrisFlyer. For long-haul routes with the Airbus A380 suites, such as Frankfurt to New York, Singapore to London, or Singapore to Auckland, you can expect to pay between 93,000 and 141,000 KrisFlyer miles for a one-way journey at the Saver level, and between 143,000 and 220,000 miles for a flight at the Advantage level. The Saver level is cheaper, but it's harder to find award space, so you may need to be ultra flexible or just very patient to find space at that cheaper level. However, if you want to try Singapore Suites according to your own schedule, you may need to shell out extra miles for that Advantage level, which has more seats available. But I'm going to let you in on a bit of a secret. If you simply want to experience the Singapore Airlines A380 suites for yourself, you can actually try it out on one of Singapore Airlines' shorter routes between Singapore and Hong Kong or New Delhi. This will also give you access to the Singapore Airlines private room, which is one of the world's hardest to get into airport lounges with unlimited a la carte fine dining that you can order as much as you want. And compared to the very high mileage pricing for the long haul routes, flying Singapore Suites on these shorter flights to Hong Kong or New Delhi will only start at 45,000 KrisFlyer miles for the one way. Now, last but not least, we have quite possibly the most ostentatious and outlandish first-class airline out there. This is, of course, the flag carrier of the Emirates of Dubai, and it's got all of the bling factor that's traditionally associated with this part of the world. I mean, come on, they've got a full shower in the sky for first-class passengers, and as if that weren't enough, there's also a full bar and lounge on board as well, where you can sip on your unlimited Dom Perignon and mingle with your fellow first-class flyers. In the first-class lounge in Dubai, you can get a free spa treatment, delicious food, a cigar lounge, and a duty-free shop all within the lounge itself. And there's also private first-class boarding gates that go directly from the lounge to the plane, so you don't have to walk through the airport terminal and rub shoulders with the riffraff. Once you get on board, the seat is blinged out in a gold finish, a vanity mirror, temperature controls, a door for extra privacy, and that's before we even start talking about the caviar and champagne service and the delicious food on board. You can find the Airbus A380 with a shower in the bar on many of Emirates' routes, including Dubai to Toronto, Washington DC, Los Angeles, and international cities like Singapore, Sydney, Auckland, and many places in Europe. And if you don't find the Airbus A380 but happen to stumble onto one of Emirates' new Boeing 777s instead, then you'll actually be treated to the airline's newest first-class product, which comes with luxury car-inspired interiors, a floor-to-ceiling door that comes with complete privacy, and virtual windows in the middle seats to give you a sense of what's going on outside the plane. However, here on the Boeing 777, you won't get the shower in the sky and you won't get the bar in the lounge. So that's ultimately the trade-off when deciding between which Emirates first class to fly. I know, definitely a first world, or should I say a first class problem. Now, the easiest way to experience Emirates first class for yourself is, of course, to have $20,000 to blow. But if you don't have that kind of money to spend on one flight, then the cheapest way to do so would be to use points. And again, you'll have to use Emirates' own points, known as Emirates Skywards miles. A one-way journey from North America to Dubai would cost you in the region of 130,000 Skywards miles. And again, you can transfer these points one-to-one from the major US points currencies, which is another example why it's so important to get involved with US credit cards if you want to maximize your first-class flying experiences. But just like Singapore Suites, I've got a tip for you if you want to experience Emirates first class at cheaper than the usual rates. In addition to their flights to and from Dubai, Emirates actually also flies between New York and both Milan and Athens in Europe. And these flights only cost 85,000 Emirates Skywards miles for the one-way journey rather than 130,000 or so. And the best part, on these flights, you won't have to pay any of the fuel surcharges that would otherwise be levied on the flights to and from Dubai. So this is definitely one of the best sweet spots in the program and by far the best way to travel between North America and Europe, one that I'd highly recommend if Emirates First Class is on your bucket list as well. Alright, we've talked about the world's best first-class airlines, and now it's time for some honorable mentions that should be on your radar as well. If you're headed to the Middle East or onwards to Asia, check out Etihad Airways First Class on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. While Etihad First Class may not be as jaw-dropping as Emirates First Class, I personally think the food is better on Etihad and it's easier to book because there's more award space and you can book through Aeroplan points, which are easy to accumulate. And like with ANA, the Etihad Airways First Class network is a little bit more limited. You can find First Class on their routes from Abu Dhabi to Washington DC, London, Geneva, and Casablanca. If you're flying one of the routes to Europe or Casablanca, that'll cost you 65,000 Aeroplan points, which I'd say is a pretty good deal for about 7 or 8 hours of flight time. However, if you're going all the way to Washington DC, that rate's gonna double to 130,000 Aeroplan points for the one-way journey. Now, perhaps the Middle East and Europe is not really your thing, and you'd rather plan for that next trip to Asia instead. In that case, don't forget about Japan Airlines First Class, which is actually one of my personal favorite ways to fly. Japan Airlines has a premium first class experience with some of the best food and drink you'll find on any first-class airline being served on board, especially if you order from the Japanese menu. And the best part, this is one of the easiest first-class airlines to book, with award space being consistently available at most 14 days out, just like with Lufthansa First Class that we talked about at the start. You'll find Japan Airlines First Class on their Boeing 777 planes from their hub in Tokyo to Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, and New York, as well as London and Paris. And what's more, booking Japan Airlines First Class is an absolute steal at only 70,000 Alaska miles for the one-way journey to North America. For a 14-hour flight to New York, I'd say that's quite a deal. And even better, Alaska miles can be easily earned here in Canada by getting the MBNA Alaska Airlines MasterCard and funneling those welcome bonuses into your Alaska Miles account. Make sure to watch this video next to understand everything you need to know about Alaska Miles so that you can start racking up those welcome bonuses and building up that points balance, and you'll find yourself indulging in that food and drink on board Japan Airlines First Class in no time at all.